Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Shah. On behalf of Calvas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we have another very interesting topic, and I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker who is going to talk about preparing discussion and conclusion for research utilization. Today, we will explore how to effectively synthesize your research findings into compelling discussions and conclusions that not only the highlight the significance of your work, but also pave the way for its practical application. Our focus will be on crafting clear, impactful narratives that resonate with your audience, whether they are academics, industry professionals, or policymakers. Let's learn those strategies that will enable us to transform our research into actionable insights that can make a real world difference. So, a really very interesting topic, and I'm sure you will learn a lot from this session as we have an expert with us in today this session. So, stay tuned because an amazing stuff are coming ahead in this session. So, before we start, I would like to thank Carl was for arranging such enlightenment sessions for their support and providing us such a wonderful platform. The aim of Calvas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to learn from their experiences, recommendations, and suggestions, which will create an impact and will enable you to learn and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually as well as to contribute to the world at large. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So today we have an amazing person as guest. He is well-known personality in academia as well as industry, and he is always ready to share his knowledge. He's a wonderful personality, contributing to the field in various ways. And today he's with us to share his wisdom and knowledge with us because he's contributing in multiple positions on multiple things. He's my mentor and friend, elder brother. So let me introduce him formally for the people. He's one of the founder and former president of the Philippine Association of Researchers for Tourism and Hospitality Incorporation, that is called PARTH, and the founder of the Junior Tourism and Hospitality Management Association of the Philippines Incorporation. He is now the online access editor and the former managing editor of the Journal of Philippine Tourism and Hospitality Studies. He also was the former editor in chief of the Journal of Marketing Research Congress. He is also a certified professional marketing educator, Philippines certified hospitality professional, and a certified guest service professional. Just recently, he organized as the founding president of the Philippine Association of Marketing Research Educators. Along with that, he serves as the project manager for San Beta College Alumni Foundation, that is the Katatubong Puno. His passion to come close to the industry is manifestation when he was just recently elected as a board of director of the affiliate division of the Hotel and Restaurant Association of the Philippines and one of the board member of the Tourism Industry Board Foundation Incorporation. At present, he is connected as a faculty member of the College of Tourism, Hospitality and Transportation Management in their open university system of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines and the Department of Marketing Management of San Beta University. Last but not the least, he is a wonderful speaker, author, teacher, researcher, trainer, professional, and above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming again our guest, Professor JOJO VILLAMIN. Welcome to the Calvas platform once again, and thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you very much. It has been an honor. And at this point in time, I'd like to apologize. You've been contacting me religiously. And finally, we're actually in this platform. So I made my promise still. But
And
more than anything else, of course, I'd like to support your advocacy. I think we need more people. I mean, in the same faith, in the same wavelength. Everybody will have to be in the same level. We're in, if in so many ways, no, we can actually reach to more people and how we can elevate that the passion in research. And I think it's a gift. It's a platform that everybody will have to be thankful for. It's because not everybody is given this kind of opportunity. And I'll bring it up to a level wherein we can actually collaborate, we can actually, share to people, and make the advocacy stronger. And situations like this will actually attest to that. So thank you also, Dr. Shah, for being a prime mover of this particular condition. Thank you very much, and congrats in advance in your advocacy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. And I really appreciate the way you just appreciated our efforts and dedication towards serving the community and to the planet. And I think our cause is the same, and that's why you are here to share your knowledge. And this is what we have been doing, and we have committed to serve our planet by sharing whatever knowledge we have and by providing a platform where they could learn. So people like you are really our gurus in the field, and people look upon you and they learn from you people, from your experiences and wisdom. I think that wouldn't have been possible without your people's support. So thank you very much once again for sparing your precious time and to contribute back to the society. So here is the slide, and over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was given a very good topic on how we can prepare discussion and conclusion for research utilization. If in case there will be discrepancy based on your practices in your respective countries, allow me to share with you what we have been doing here in the Philippines and how we actually combat and prepare discussions and conclusions. Although some of my examples will actually be in a journal in the Philippines, and of course somehow published journals in different countries, but generally the approach is our practice in the Philippines. So allow me to start this particular topic, which is preparing discussion and conclusion for research utilization in a matter wherein the approach that we're gearing towards, especially with the Philippine Association of Researchers for Tourism and Hospitality, has been promoting to our members all over the country. And we are talking about the IMRAD approach. No? So I guess everybody knows what IMRAD is: the introduction, methods, research, results, and discussion. So if you happen to notice, no, with this introduction of IMRAD approach, it will be convenient on the part of the teacher and on the part of the researcher, or perhaps our students, no, in preparing their publishable format. You know what? Honestly speaking, in the Philippines, we have chapters one, two, three, four, five, and some are even proposing like 7 or 8 chapters in a research paper. And that's why the dilemma will always be there. That's why with the Philippine Association of Researchers for Tourism and Hospitality, what we did is actually to pattern, no, our research output to an IMRAD model so that it will be concise and readily publishable when it comes to publication format and other journal requirements. If there are changes and differences, it will just be minimal as compared to what we actually prepare here in the Philippines, up to chapter 5, 6, 7, and even 8, no, some in some universities and colleges here. So following the IMRED approach, it will actually be so much of the conciseness, no, of a particular research paper is geared towards getting closer to how journals or online databases requires their submissions to be in this particular approach. And one of the areas to be checked into is actually the preparation of the discussion part, no, and conclusion for research. No, the area on research utilization will come in the recommendation area, wherein you guys will actually be thinking of how are you supposed to maximize the results and discussion in order for you to get into the research utilization. So let's begin the discussion with what is really conclusion. No, in most cases, conclusion is the final paragraph of a research paper and serves to help the reader understand why your research should matter to them. So it will actually give you an inkling already that one of my favorite areas or segment in a research paper will always be conclusion. To be honest with you, when I'm scanning a research journal or a scholarly article for that purpose, no, I will normally give into checking first the abstract. And after the abstract has been made, somehow I have already an inkling on how the paper will actually go or what happened to the paper. And then eventually I go to the conclusion. The conclusion is somehow the heart, no, somehow the heart of a research paper, wherein solely, no, most of the time, if not 100%, it's actually the product of the author. This is where you will find how the author is actually integrating, summarizing, and some other concerns are being, integrating, no, the results of the study. And somehow when we talk about conclusion, as well, if we compare it with, the introduction, normally you will have the citation coming from the other authors. But with conclusion, and in most cases, similar to what I mentioned a while ago, mostly 100%, it should come from the author. So this will actually tell you how analytical the authors are when it comes to preparing conclusion. That's why I call it the heart of the research paper. But of course, you have also your research objectives. However, the focus is in the conclusion. It's because right after you drafted your introduction, your methodology, etc., the thing will be conclusion will always be the factor wherein you have the last, way on how you can actually save your research paper. So it's very critical that when you write conclusion, that should actually compel the author to be very analytical, to be very critical, and to be very specific, no? So there will be no room for mediocre conclusion or perhaps not giving so much importance to the nitty-gritty data that you were able to get based from your data presentation and analysis. That's how important conclusion is. And I think everybody will have to agree with me. It's because more than the more than that the authors are the one doing it, no, again, in most cases with no citation or acknowledgement at all, definitely conclusion can actually, present the gist of what you're looking for in a particular study. I always tell this to my students, especially when they're doing the literature review, to always go and consider what the author's intentions are or what the author's final say when we talk about a research paper. It's also a way on how you can attest on how peculiar authors are when they are writing already their conclusion. So you will find if the author is really something like, just putting their heads up or probably doing like something that will actually just a summary of information. But if you're looking at an author wherein he can conclusively say, let's say for a particular community or a particular set of population, then definitely you can actually tell me that the authors are really keen on details, very pertinent, very peculiar, very focused on how they will make a very credible conclusion. Now, however, not all conclusions are perfect. So I hope I can give you a guideline on how you guys should write your conclusion in order for us to, better off our preparation, most importantly. So, conclusion should actually restate your topic and why it is important. So, most of the time, aside from the topic, of course, you have the title. And somehow, no, the title should actually be addressed in the conclusion. I always tell this to my students that at the bottom line, you always have to consider what was your title again? And what was your conclusion after addressing that kind of title? Were you able to find out the real identity, the real determination, the real answer to your particular title? Somehow, the title will actually give you an inkling on what will be the conclusion, and it's the author's role and responsibility to mention, no, whether you're going to accept or not the title because it will somehow be supportive with the conclusion. In most cases, these are practically telling us that when you have a title or a topic for a particular research paper, the conclusion will actually be very supportive of your title. If not, or otherwise, then definitely it will contradict. And it doesn't mean anything bad at all. If you are going forward to your title, or if you're going against with your title, it's a research. So there's nothing wrong with doing a research which will contradict your title, or even your title for that purpose. Because most researcher, oh, my title is not actually adhering to the conclusion, but it's not always the case. That's why you're doing research, you're doing a research paper, you're collecting data. It's because you want to prove, no, whether your title or your topic for that purpose will be supported by your conclusion right after the study. And it will actually be a good idea for you to do that, no? So get away with the misconception or with the dilemma that when you have a title, the conclusion should always conform. So it should not always be the case. That's why you're doing research. And sometimes, of course, no, there's a bad thing here. Probably in most cases, if the conclusion is something like going against the title, that makes the research bad. But the idea is incorrect, no? It's not always the case that the conclusion will always adhere to the title. So it will be okay. That's why you're doing research. So that in its sense will actually tell you how important conclusion is. It could be a supportive mechanism or somehow a contradiction to your title. And that's a good thing about research. So don't feel bad if you guys will actually have a bad conclusion as compared to the title. So it's okay. It's okay to contradict your title. It's okay to contradict your topic. It's because that's a result of research. That's the purpose why you're having research. Otherwise, don't do it anymore. Okay? And sometimes it will give you a very good focus and strong points why you are contradicting your title. So somehow it will actually give you that edge already that um, even yourself, no, you're changing your statements because of the conclusion after the arrival and the integration of the data. Now, another important factor when we have conclusion is to restate your thesis or claim. So imagine, again, if we are to adhere to the topic or the title, it will always be good to restate your thesis or claim. So somehow, in most cases, you're talking about the thesis statement, you're talking about the research objectives. Others may call it, statement of the problem or objectives of the study. So it is presented in so many ways, and conclusion should actually be the one answering those. So if in case you guys are doing it, then definitely you guys will also be in that position wherein, although it might contradict or it may agree with or with the title or the topic or the research objective, but at least you were able to support it with your study. In fact, conclusion should actually be addressing all the research objective in your study. So don't forget that conclusion will always be adhering to the research objectives of the study. In the Philippine practice, no, we always go for the enlistment of the objectives, and we actually check whether the research papers are being addressed properly or one by one. We need to check. Like for example, research objective 1, let me check if this is answered by your conclusion. Let me check your research objective 2 if this is addressed in your conclusion. Let me know if you are to contradict or not. So in most cases, no, that will actually go like two to tango. So whatever is written in your research objective, your thesis statement, your research objective, your objectives of the study, it has to be answered by the conclusion. So that's the normal case that we are practically practicing here in the Philippines. So it goes hand in hand, no? Now, interestingly, we started with how conclusion should actually be made. And I made a strong point there that don't be afraid if your conclusion is something that will go against your topic or your title. Look at this. The third bullet is address opposing viewpoints and explain why readers should align with your position. So it goes like this, no? If you are really a credible author, you've been through a lot of your data presentation, be ethically sound with regard to your methods, to your data, etc. And at the end of the day, by your conclusion, you're totally contradicting what is the common phenomenon. So probably it's a misconception. And definitely your research is a tool or it's a way on how you're supposed to create so much of agenda that will align your position with the readers. So it's a good thing that you're giving options to the readers, whether they will actually agree with you or not. But convincing readers in order for them to align their posts or to align their conviction with what your research or perhaps your conclusion may not be your role anymore, as long as you are practically presenting, this is what I found in the study, this is what I think is actually the best after analytics, after statistics, after critical thinking, etc. You put these things together. You're not supposed to persuade, no, but somehow give them a sort of a guideline that this is the result of my study, and the conclusion is like this. If this is not conforming with the reader's point of view, then definitely you just have to be strong, no? You really have to be supporting of your conclusion in order for you to tell the whole world about your stand about this particular phenomenon. And there's nothing wrong with that, no? Again, you don't need to conform every time that you're going to have with the conclusion with what many will actually be telling about a certain issue or topic or a social concern for that purpose. Again, there's nothing wrong if what you actually conclude may not be, adhering to the rest of the society. Anyway, it's your research, and they cannot blame you. No, they cannot even compel you to change your view because it's the result of your research, and you don't need to do that. You don't need to conform with what others are saying. It's because it's your data that is telling you that, hey, Jojo, you really have to have this kind of conclusion. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. No? Now, another would be it include a call for action or overview of future research based possibilities. Conclusion somehow is actually telling us of many things, no? I really love conclusion who will or which will actually tell us of a call for action. That means there must be something to be done, there must be something to be improved, there must be something to look forward to. And of course, the overview of future research possibilities will entail also how research should actually be taken into another perspective. At times, you actually get a particular topic or title with future direction from other researches because you can actually look into, let me compare my study with the previous study, and let me compare my data to the previous data so that I will know the integration of which. In most cases, if we find the data very aligned to one another, then it's actually okay. The more that you will have a strong point. But if the data from a previous study as compared to your existing one will contradict to one another, then definitely your conclusion will talk otherwise. And it's okay. It's because you're talking about so many options, so many possibilities that might come along the way. Again, the world is round and the ball is rolling. So you can never tell that in most cases you're always on top, you're always on the bottom, you're always on this particular side because the world is changing. And so is your conclusion. So again, I keep on saying, don't be afraid if your conclusion is not conforming to what is the general perception over a certain phenomenon. It's because it's your data telling you, and that's the basis of your conclusion. That otherwise you don't need to have a you don't need to believe with your data if that is the case. So that's how I see conclusion. That's how I actually have conclusion in several perspective, that it shouldn't be conforming. It also be a presentation of contradiction. It could also be, a complementing uh, element, and it will also be a predictive things in the future. Okay, now while we're discussing about conclusion, there is also misconception in conclusion. A common mistake when there is inconclusive evidence is to confuse with no evidence of an effect. So, meaning to say, it's hard to have an inconclusive evidence, especially when there is no data. So, I think it should be a no-no that you are to present an inconclusive evidence with no data at all. So you really have to be very careful, no? It's because it's a common mistake, no? Sometimes people are putting conclusion even though the data or the population is not really a representation of a very good sample. And that in itself will actually be a common mistake. It might be true for certain number of people, but of course, if you're looking at the tendency, a central tendency of a particular population, then that's the time that you can actually make a conclusion, no? Especially if you're using non-probability sampling, it might be true for the community that you are addressing the concern, but it's not really a representation of the entire population. So conclusion should only be limited to the community, to the number of persons, and of course to the number of sectors or segments that you were able to touch with your data gathering. Now, it is wrong to claim that it shows that an intervention has no effect or is no different from the control intervention. That's also another thing that you should not do, especially as an author. It's because most of the time, when you're talking about intervention has no effect or is no different from controlled intervention, then definitely it will give the author, you know, a feeling of safe. You're safe in saying there's no effect or no different, so there's no difference for that particular purpose. So it gives, as let's say, a safe side for the authors, to mention all those things. No, it's because it's a safe place for him or her to mention that. However, when there is a positive but statistically not significant trend, authors commonly describe it as promising. No, so imagine, why I'm laughing is that it's very common, no, among students, most probably, that even if the result is insignificant already, you will actually turn it something like positive or very promising. It's because that's the result of the study, because that's very common when you're talking about statistically it's insignificant. However, it is positive, but definitely you will have to adhere to being positive as to mentioning it's actually promising. It's a no also, no? So it's not always that positive, although it's a significant, then definitely you are to tell, even if it is something like so positive but it's insignificant, so it doesn't reflect, a very good conclusion at all. In the same manner, when you have like a negative effect, no, people will always say a warning sign. So such language may also be harmful, no, when you are talking about control or having like a conclusion for that matter. um One of the mistakes, it came across to my mind though while I'm actually speaking or discussing things. You know what? Every time students will actually mention about a range. So let's say, for example, like strongly agree, agree, disagree, and you have strongly disagree, and you have like, scaling. Let's say, for example, 3.25 to 4, 2.5 to 3.49. Students tend to rank. So who is the number one, number two, number three, number four? But essentially, the range will just tell you those with the mean rating of, let's say, 3.20, 3.59 to 4 will actually be all of which, regardless whether who is the highest or not in that category, they are all still be considered as strongly agree if that is the case for a Likert scale. No? But you know what? In the Philippines, especially when you're talking about those kinds of things, students tend to, put a rank into strongly agree, which one is number one in strongly agree. So, the biases and the conclusion may actually tell you what is the scaling for, no? So you really have to adhere to the range that was given by the scaling in order for you to attest whether a particular mean belongs to the strongly agree category or agree for that purpose. So therefore, you can actually say that, let's say, for example, there are five statements and everybody adheres to strongly agree, then the notion it has to be strongly agree. It do not rank at all. It's because all of them were able to be in the scaling of strongly agree. Now, another mistake is to frame the conclusion in wishful terms. And I think this is very common, among researchers, that conclusion will actually go into a wishful thinking that it might happen, or something that it should be conditional, no? And if that's the case, then definitely you're not giving a conclusion. You're actually predicting already what's going to happen. But in conclusion, you have to give a picture of what's happening based on the data that you were able to gather. So in my case, I want a clear picture on how conclusion should actually be made, and how conclusion should give me a picture of what's happening in the situation, in the existing condition. So give me a better picture through a conclusion. And that gives me an inkling already that the conclusion is very strong, no? Very in effect if that is the case. Another common mistake is to reach conclusions that go beyond the evidence. And this is practically being, you know, at times, no, when you are the researcher and you can come up with a conclusion, sometimes the conclusion may not touch already the research objective. So let's say, for example, I was able to experience that a researcher was only talking about the ServQual model. So you're talking about the facilities, the services of a certain resort. However, the student was able to experience also bad things going to the resort. So essentially, what was highlighted in the conclusion was the experience of the students or the researchers getting into the conclusion that, going to the hotel or going to the resort may not be so okay, something like that. No, it goes along that way. So I was like asking, where is that in your research objectives? So if this is not something focused or given in your research objectives, that should not be part of the conclusion, because that's your own experience. So this is where you will find the bias already. Imagine it's not part of the research objective, but because you are the author, you tend to put those types of conclusion in your paper already. So those are the things that you shouldn't do in a conclusion, especially if this is not a part of your research objectives. So imagine how detrimental uh, creating or writing conclusion is when you are talking about a scholarly article. So be very careful, no? As well, for as long as you guys are not going to be biased, you're not putting your personal interest, just limit your presentation to the data being taken into consideration at hand, no? So at this point, excuse me, I have a very good example here. This is Future of Farm Tourism in the Philippines, Challenges, Strategies, and Insights. So it was actually mentioned a while ago that when you are making conclusion, you should have address already the statement of the problem or the thesis statement for that purpose. I think this was very good. No, farm tourism is considered one of the drivers of Philippine tourism's growth with Republic Act number 10816, along with the DOT farm site accreditation standards to ensure quality farm sites in the country. So that's an insight, no? So you are actually addressing one of the areas of the topic, which is actually your insight. And your conclusion is considered one of the drivers of Philippine tourism. Okay? So intergovernmental collaboration and coordination are mandated in the said policy um, in developing, promoting, and strategizing farm tourism in the country. So it will actually be a challenge or a strategy because you're talking about collaboration and coordination. So again, it addresses the title of the study with the government initiatives and increasing number of farm sites and farm tourisms is projected. So that's actually an insight. No, imagine there is a futuristic approach, and of course, you're talking about with the current the research literature on farm tourism has been prevalent in developed countries and is undoubtedly scarce in developing countries. So imagine that's practically your challenges. So this in effect will actually tell you that conclusion should actually adhere or perhaps will address your title or the topic of the study. Now, but this one is a scenario wherein it adheres to the title. No, so the conclusion and the topic will actually go hand in hand. So there's nothing wrong with that if that is the case, no? So that's practically with conclusion. Now, another area is actually the discussion. So if you happen to check with the IMRED approach, so I for introduction, M for methodology, R for research, and D for discussion. So the discussion reviews the findings and puts them into context of the overall research, no? So it will actually give you an inkling already of the findings, and then you have to integrate the data. So it brings together all the sections that came before, and it allows a reader to see the connections between each part of the research paper. The discussion part will actually tell you how good the authors are. It's because it's his way of integrating the data. It's not something that, will actually tell you like a summative approach on how the data should actually be presented, but it will actually give you an inkling on how interrelated the data are when you talk about presenting it in your scholarly article. The third bullet will actually tell you in a discussion section, the author engages in three necessary steps. It should be the interpretation, the analysis, and your explanation. Then that's how crucial also discussions are. So, an effective discussion section will tell a reader why the research results are important and where they fit in the current literature, while also being self critical and candid about the shortcomings of the study. So it will give you an overall approach, no? It's not that you're always presenting how the authors were able to get the data in a most painful somehow, no? The most ethical way, the most difficult way. But it will also tell you on how the discussions or the data is being looked into and how it will actually create an impact to the entire scholarly article. So that's the impact of discussions, no? When we're talking about preparations of discussions in a research paper. More importantly, no, discussion should summarize the key findings from the research and link them to the initial research question. Seek to answer this question: what should readers take away from this paper? And I think that's very important, no? I always see to it that at the end of the paper, my readers, regardless whether they are part of my discipline or not, or my industry or not, they will actually get something from my research paper. And I think it will actually go for the social relevance, no? Not necessarily social relevance but for the relevance itself, that will actually tell you on how key findings, no, will be integrated and be put into the discussion. Second, place the findings in context. So this step will involve going back to the literature review section and analyzing how the results fit in the previous research. Well, the good thing about the discussion is that you always put a cross analysis. It's not bad that you always refer to the literature review. It's because it will actually help you, no? I always look at the three factors. Say, for example, is it actually adhering? Is it actually contradicting, or is it actually just complementing? So if those three areas are practically, being attests, being put into, attestation of a particular data, then your discussion might actually be a more laborious thing, a more, accommodating for that particular field. So I always put in the factor that you really have to look into whether it's complementing, it's adhering, or contradicting. I think that will be, the best critical way on how authors will actually think analytically when it comes to discussion. Now, the third area for discussion is you have to mention and discuss any unexpected results. And this is where I find the study very, very exciting. No, when when you know that somehow, no, you are practically looking at the results in the way that you want it to be, but at the middle or perhaps in the beginning or even in the end, you will find out that it's actually contradicting for your views. And do not actually get away with it. This is more exciting, this is more relevant, so that, you know what, in every decision making, you always have the, how do I call that? The devil's advocate, the other side of the fence, no? It's because somehow when you are really focused on one area, you don't tend to appreciate the other factors. So in discussion, you really have to describe the results and provide a reasonable interpretation of why they may have appeared. So somehow, it will not be part of the results if it will not have an impact to the study, and that makes the research data a lot more exciting. In fact, I always challenge my students, no, when it comes to their presentation, especially with inferential statistics. You will actually find out. I always tell them, so what? What's the implication of that? And how are you supposed to use the data, whether it's significant or insignificant, in your recommendation? Because if I will not find that, the more that I will actually look into the capacity of the authors, whether they are really integrating the results of the study. Because most often people will just say, oh, there is no statistical or relationship, or there is no difference at all. So what's the context of that? What's the implication of that? What's the purpose of that? Why do you think that is relevant, and how are you supposed to use that in the recommendation? I always appear to be like that kind of person, because I don't want to stop in a matter wherein you will just mention in the paper that there is no significant relationship, that there is a significant relationship. It has to be supported by the implication. And you always ask the reason, or perhaps the question, why is it happening? Why do you think this data appears? And why do you think this particular phenomenon is telling me that there is no significant difference at all, or otherwise there is a significant difference? So you also challenge yourself, no? It's because in that particular way, you'll be able to understand and appreciate the data in such a way that it will become more interesting, no? It will become more exciting when you are to provide so much of interpretation. So additionally, if an unexpected result is significant to the research question, be sure to explain that connection. And I would love to hear those things. I would love to read those things when you are writing it in the research paper. In most cases, the students will be able to discuss it orally, but they fail to actually write it in the paper. This is where you will find, you know, a certain way on how you can actually improve your writing skills. And I hope you guys will actually do the same thing, no? So you do not stop by saying that there is no significant relationship. However, you have to put the implication. Why do you think that phenomenon is happening? And again, that will be the start of a very good discussion, no? But I'm not telling that if there is no unexpected result, it's not going to be exciting. Of course, there will always be different attacks on how you're supposed to present the discussion. Now, the fourth, it addressed limitations or weaknesses in the research. I will not be surprised because you're talking about of course, the capacity, no, because of addressing limitations helps build your credibility as a writer, because the reader sees that you have thought critically about what your study does and does not cover. It's because most of the time you have to be humble enough to admit that, hey, this is only the scope of my study. Forgive me if I wasn't able to do that, or perhaps to expand on this, because my concentration deals with this particular factor. And don't be afraid to do those things. It's because it will make you a very credible researcher. So it's not your loss, it's not your um shall I say, shortcomings in order for you, if you are to address your limitations with your study. So it will become a factor of strength, a factor of credibility as a writer, no, rather than claiming everything is actually included in your study. The fifth is that it provides a brief look at potential follow-up research studies or for future researches. Recommend a few areas where further investigation may be critical or crucial. However, don't go overboard with the suggestions, as they can leave a reader thinking more about the gaps in the paper rather than the actual findings. And sometimes when you are posing many future studies, oh, the future researchers can actually look into this time frame, blah blah blah. You have like six bullets already. Sometimes the reader will actually think, if there there are so many gaps in the study, if there are so many future researchers that you need to be done, that you need to be doing on top of your research paper, then what's the credibility of your paper anyway? No? So it will give that kind of impression. That's why perhaps you can limit like three areas where in future researchers can actually do it. And of course, the sixth and finally, conclude with a restatement of the most significant findings and their implications. At times in the Philippines, students will still mention 2 point something like that. There is no significant difference. Get away with those things that you are merely duplicating the result of the data, and it should not be that way. But you have to explain why the research is important and remind readers of the connections. It has to, outside material such as existing literature on an aspect of the field that is affected by the study. In that case, no, you are to be given ways on how you're supposed to connect with the other data, and it will be, the capacity, the competency of a particular author and how to integrate one point to another. Okay? Now, if we are to differentiate, since we're talking about discussion versus conclusions, here are some of the areas for you to find out. So one is, if you are into conclusion, it summarizes parts of the paper, which I think will actually address all the research objectives. But in the discussion, however, is a much more thorough and rigorous examination of the results. It's because you are trying to connect one point to another. It might not be research objective 1 to research objective 2, but it could be research objective 1 to your research objective 4. You find the relationship to one another, and that separates conclusion to a discussion. So it's more critical and analytical when you're talking about discussion as compared to conclusion, because you give the implications of the story. Okay? And it requires the author to interpret those results by looking at how or why they are the way they are. So something like, why do you think that should happen? What should be the implication? What are the implications of doing those things? No? Why do you think that certain phenomenon should exist? And why are they existing? So you really have to be so inquisitive, no? In terms of putting your discussion in a certain way that even yourself, you're putting yourself in a scenario that, what about if? So that will actually address so much of your discussion points already. Additionally, the discussion section is the space where the author acknowledges the limits of the research and identify gaps for future research. So again, this might become your strength also, that you are to limit your points of interest into a specific section. Again, you don't need to point out on everything, but of course, give also a space for you, because you cannot always present everything in one research paper. And it would be a good thing also for you. Let's say, for example, that you guys will actually have a conclusion, a discussion wherein you're going to have a phases like phase one, phase two, and phase three that will actually attest on a different sets of study. No? And finally, this section investigates the implications of the research based on the findings and results, and it draws meaningful conclusions from those implications. So, where a conclusion is brief and touches on the main points of the paper, the discussion is much longer and more detailed. So, somehow, conclusion will actually be your bullet points, and your discussion will actually be the result, the the they call it the byproduct, no, of the results of the study, wherein you are going to be more specific and perhaps more detailed. However, it will encompass a longer discussion. Now, since my talk will actually how do we maximize conclusion and discussions in order for us to prepare into research utilization? I only highlighted four, but there are so many. But these are, areas of interest when you actually utilize much of the conclusion and the discussion. So on the top will always be your theoretical implication. In some studies, they call it body of knowledge. So somehow, when you talk about theoretical implications or body of knowledge, normally you will end up with the discussion that you are triggering already the theoretical foundation. So similarly here, theoretical implications relate to how your findings connect to the other theories or ideas in your field, while practical implications are related to what we can do with the results of the study. So this will actually provide you that research utilization may actually be imposing a theoretical implication and a practical implication. So in that sense, you can actually maximize the discussion, leading you to theoretical implication and practical implications. No, in that sense, no, you will actually guide the reader that, oh, the result of my study will actually be a body of knowledge. Oh, the result of my study can be your foundation in order for you to think of an action research. And that's something that is very true when we're talking about scholarly articles, no? So these are the implications that a study has for advancing theoretical understanding in a particular field. For example, a study that finds a new relationship between two variables can have implications for the development of theories and models in that field. So that might actually lead to another creation of a model. And that's there's nothing wrong with that. That's why you're talking about research, no? So you're talking about, hypothesis in that sense for a theoretical foundation wherein one variable can lead to two variables and interrelated to another variable, etc., etc. And it doesn't stop at all. No, it's because research is made to that. Research is made in that manner. No, okay. Now, another one which is very close to my heart is the recommendation. It's because of your community extension. How can you make your discussion be a tool in order for you to recommend on some area? So let me read this one. The findings have significance for policymakers who want to help the rural sector by delivering high quality extension services. In fact, this example touches already two of my research utilization, and that is the policy, but I will be having another discussion for policy, but this one is for community extension. Further, it is essential to carry out a thorough assessment to resolve issues of responsibility and accountability in order to build beneficial intervention to maintain the delivery of effective quality extension services. So this was taken from the study of Demetria A. Corpus et al. With the title Empowering the Community Through the Extension Services of a Teacher Education Institution in the Philippines. So that will actually give you an inkling already that we have discussions and conclusion that may actually lead to community extensions. So what does it mean, no? You're talking about an area wherein it's going to be very, very beneficial that community extension might actually be a very good result after you've integrated your discussions of the paper. And this is where you will find research to be more meaningful if you can put things into action. I'm not saying theoretical implication is not okay, but of course, no, if we have to have, concrete actions or something that will actually lead to a betterment of a particular community, why not? And I hope, I'm encouraging a lot of researchers here that most probably it will also be a very good factor that our research can be utilized for community extension. I actually sat no in one of as a panel in one of the research paper, and I was able to find out that they were talking about, I don't know if you've heard about tricycle drivers in the Philippines. They can be converted already as tourist guide. No? So once you ride a tricycle here, there's a motorcycle and you have a sidecar here. We call it tricycle. It's because the tri means you have three wheels. No, that's why it's a tricycle for that purpose. So three wheels because of a sidecar. No, so um and the community extension arises, it's because of why do we not, because we're looking at how the competency of our tricycle drivers to be to become as a tour guide, no? And our community extension is that since we are a tourism faculty, we are going to teach our tricycle drivers to become full-fledged tourist guides or tour guides for that purpose. And that becomes a community extension. No? So imagine you're doing a research paper and at the same time you actually consider a community extension program out of the research paper. So that's something that you can actually be proud of, no? You have the body and at the same time you were able to help directly, no, face to face with the recipients of your research paper. Now, another one which is very controversial and very close to my heart also is the policy and lobbying. You know, at times, no, I took up College of Law, but I wasn't able to finish the program. And it will always be, a thing for me that you always challenge the legal impediments, the legal implications of a certain phenomenon. That's why discussions may actually lead to research utilization in terms of policy and lobbying, and you can't help it. But most of the time, no, like for example, in this study assessing the impact of agritourism initiatives on rural development and community-based agricultural management, it should actually attest, no, that it will actually lead to policy and lobbying. Let me read, no. The findings of the research offer important suggestions for improving how agritourism projects are incorporated into rural areas. Initially, it is recommended that policymakers as well as local authorities work together to optimize regulatory procedures, thereby reducing administrative obstacles for agritourism providers. And you know what? The same scenario has been, done also when I was like commissioned by I think in most countries they call it Ministry of Tourism. Ours is Department of Tourism. We actually consider revising the farm site accreditation in the Philippines through our commission research. You know what? It feels good that somehow through your competency, through your effort, you were able to change, a policy that will actually help peasant farmers to create their own farm tourism sites. It's because of that accreditation. It's because of your research paper. You were able to give hope to these peasant farmers to have, especially now that the Philippines is actually considering El Nino phenomenon. So there's a long drought, and I don't know if the concept of farm tourism may actually be a good opportunity for them to, somehow improve the way they offer things to the tourists. In fact, just last week I visited another farm tourism site. Despite the fact of El Nino, no, you can actually notice that the pool is actually out of water. The rivers going there is actually almost dried. It's dry already, and you can't imagine. No, these things are happening. But at the end of the day, we were able to enjoy the farm, and I was like, taking pictures left and right already. So I hope, no, the accreditation in the Philippines will actually be changed totally if we're talking about accreditation system. So it's actually a good thing. It's happening already, no? And imagine you were able to contribute already, even in your own little minds, even in your own little ways. You are practically changing for the betterment of the country with regard to the topic of farm tourism. And I'm happy. No, I'm quite happy about it. Now, the last that I will be sharing, but of course, there are a lot of research utilization. You're talking about future researches. We're actually discussing these things already a while ago, and of course, even managerial or strategic implications. No, but I actually limit it to four for discussion. But of course, no, there are so many ways methodical implications, theoretical implication, practical implication, and there were so many sources on how you're supposed to utilize research and discussion for that purpose. But I highlighted only four. So the last that I will share with you is actually with action research. No, the title goes like implementation of agritourism programs in Quezon Province, basis for sustainable action plan. So this is practically with Atihon and Mercado of University University of Batangas. So part of their implication is actually the action plan to promote agritourism sustainable development. The researchers propose action plan which includes activities and programs based on the different social, cultural, environmental, and economic aspects and the sustainable development of agritourism. No, so that will actually tell you it will actually require the perhaps the authors or the readers to put into a perfect action or a study, a plan, a project, a program that will actually lead so much of completion of this particular research. Unless there is really a agritourism sustainable development, particularly in that area where you will find the study, then you were able to maximize the discussion part into something like a concrete action. And that's something that I want you guys to, utilize research for. It's not always a theory, it's not always a conceptual framework, it's not always a body of knowledge, but somehow let's put into practice the results of the study. Anyway, that's the intention, to improve the lives of others, especially in a particular community. But then and again, I'm not naman limiting ourselves to, these kinds of things. Anyway, even if you're talking about body of knowledge, you're talking about community extension, policy, action research, even future implications, and even managerial and strategic implications, all of this has its own purpose. It so happened that in my case, I want the research paper to be something like, in a real sense of action, in a real sense that after the research paper, it can touch so many lives in a reality setup. No, that's how I look at research in a more meaningful way. So with that, I hope I was able to share to you the best of conclusion and discussion and how it relates, of course, with how we use extensively and maximize the power of conclusion and discussion in creating so much of research utilization. In the Philippines, we call it magandang gabi because it's actually 9 p.m. already in the Philippines. So magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Wow, Prof. Jojo, once again, you did a fantastic job, as it was expected that you will be educating us on the conclusion and the discussion part. And very nicely, you have talked about that what is conclusion by providing a wonderful text and description, followed by the misconception. And then you clearly mention what is the distinction between the conclusion and discussion. I have seen in my own students that sometimes they are very confused regarding the
That's correct.
conclusion. Yeah, and very nicely you have just showed in one slide that this is the difference, and we make to differentiate between these two. And probably people they consider it in a very different notion. So you came up with a very clear distinction between those two. And I love the last part as well, which was really based on the implication, the community, and the action research, which was nice thing. I think these are the things which people are looking forward, and that's why they have come and they have been watching for these kind of seminars and webinars, that they could have the clear idea that what is the distinction between these two. And you have provided a wonderful description and the content for them. And I love the way you came up with the different research articles so that you can elaborate in a very perfectly manner. I like that thing because later on they can go to the reference and they can search as well further for their understanding and to get deeper insight regarding that thing. So thank you very much once again, Prof. Jojo. Wonderful presentation and powerful content you have shared with our audience from around the globe. But there are certain questions which needs your elaboration and your discussion on that. That how can you come up with these kind of question, and what is your opinion on that? So should we start with the first question, please?
Yes, please go ahead. No problem.
Thank you so much. The first question they want to ask that what techniques can be used to highlight the novelty and relevance of the research in the discussion part? You have already talked about it, but just quickly, if you can give certain tips to that our participant, yes, please.
Okay. You know what? Techniques, we can actually categorize, no, in so many ways on how we can actually highlight the novelty and relevance of the research in the discussion area. In some editorials or perhaps journals, the outline will actually go like, they will require really, let's say, for example, what is the theoretical implication, what is the practical implication, what is the strategic implication, what is the managerial implication, and what is the future directions of research. That will actually entail of the so many techniques and how you can highlight the novelty and relevance of your research. However, you're not supposed to put everything unless it is required in the journal, unless it's actually, vividly will be checked by the editors. And if that case will happen, you don't have any option but to follow. But if you are looking at your own concept of, discussions, you can actually limit the way you actually would like to address. Say, for example, if the turnout of the result will actually be like theory or body of knowledge, then you can limit it to theoretical implication. But if you would like to further enhance on how you can actually put the body of knowledge into concrete action, then you can put action plan in that particular area. So the thing here is that you really have to scrutinize first the relevance and the discussion points that you want to share and convey to the readers before you categorize it. It's not always that you have to have always everything. You can imagine there are so many ways, even methodical implications, so many implications, and you are going to find that in so many journals as well. But then again, you don't need to fill out all of those things all together and then put it in your research paper. That's a no again, unless you're going to submit it in a journal and the editor and the journal itself is requiring you to fill out those kinds of implications. But I'm pretty sure, no, that you're the ones who's actually proposing your research paper. The categories will actually be limited only to, I guess I have to borrow the word highlight, because you want to highlight on that area. So you just have to put it in a perspective in a way that you can strongly convince the reader that that's what you're actually going forward to. No? So again, it's not a requirement that you have to have these techniques all at the same time, but you have to look into the discussion points that you want to convey to your reader. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful answer. And very nicely, you have mentioned that different journals have different template and they ask you to write in a different way. Particularly, even in the abstract session, they just come up with the originality and the implication, practical and theoretical. Again, you have nicely said that don't put all things in one thing, but you can split it in different part of the research paper. Very nice. I think these are the small tips which matters a lot and for which the people are looking forward. And in a very easy way, you have given these tips to the our audience that how can they come up with the relevancy and novelty. Now, another interesting question they want to ask regarding your view as a reviewer, since you are the reviewer of different journals, remain the editor. So they want to ask that. As a reviewer, how do you determine the appropriateness of conclusion part? Very nice question in terms of author that what should they what are the different things they should consider? Yes, please.
Okay, you know what? I have a very simple answer to that. May I look for the research objective? And if the research objectives are being addressed in the conclusion, then I will go to my next step. If you were able to answer the research objectives already, then the conclusion should not be a repetition of your data, of your results in the data interpretation. Because in most cases, authors will normally repeat the data So it should not be the case already. So the moment that you are to put conclusion already, I think that should be in the sense that you are to integrate, you are to summarize it already, and there's no repetition already of what has been presented in your data presentation and in analysis. So it's so simple. One is it should answer the research objectives. Number two, of course, you're not supposed to repeat what has been presented in your data presentation. Otherwise, it will become redundant. So again, and the third, of course, give me a gist, no, of all the summary of all the data, what is really relevant in in that peculiar manner, so that I will appropriately address, no, the research objective. So it goes hand in hand. Let me check the research objectives. There's no repetition already, and again, it should actually go back again to the research objectives wherein there is really an adherence to one another, and that becomes a perfect conclusion. um I think I have another story to tell you, no? I think I made that story a while ago, but let me just reiterate it, no? Don't be biased. Don't conclude what is not actually given in the research objectives, because normally the authors will actually give conclusion based on their own opinion. So that's something also that you're not supposed to do. Only limit your conclusion based on the result of the data and not include your own personal biases. That's something that you have to learn how to separate yourself from the data itself so that you can have a perfect conclusion.
Wow, very nice once again. And you have given a very wonderful answer to that question. But you have already somehow addressed our next question, which is related to research objectives. And let me just show on screen. They want to ask that, Prof, how can researcher ensure that their discussion of the results are aligned with the research hypothesis and objectives in a paper? Yes, so you have already addressed this question halfly, so you can extend it to answer this question as well. Yes, please.
Okay. So, you know what, in the Philippines, again, if I have to go back again to the old format of chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm telling you, like, even chapter 7 and 8, no, you will actually notice, like, for example, objective number one, discussion of the results, and then hypothesis one, discussion, something like that. But of course, the IMRAD approach will not allow you to do that in that manner, because discussion in the discussion part is actually different from our traditional format. It's good to know that it will actually entice the authors to be more peculiar, no, especially in the discussion part, not the discussion of the one that you're asking, but the discussion part of the paper. It will actually give you so much of interrelatedness from one point to another on how you're supposed to connect and integrate your discussion points, no, and that in itself will actually attest that you were able to address already hypotheses. However, Dr. Shah, again, if the editors and the journal will require it like vividly, what's your answer for the hypothesis one, hypothesis two, we don't have any option but to follow. But if we are to look into different scholarly article presented in a publishable format, probably you're talking about Scopus, you're talking about Taylor and Francis, Emerald, etc. You're not talking about like hypothesis one, this is the answer. No, it's not presented in that manner. But you're looking at in a discussion area wherein you can connect even research objective one to hypothesis. And this is something like a challenge, no? I always tell this, that writing a research paper is not always a technical matter. It's also a creative matter in a sense that you can create, so much of integration, whether you're talking about research objective one, connect it with hypothesis one, and that makes a perfect creativity when you're dealing with research paper. And that somehow, I think it's a gift, but it's also can be enhanced when you're really good into writing. You know what, Dr. Shah, I do not actually isolate what I've learned in the past and integrate it now. It's because what I learned from the past, like for example, the traditional format 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that becomes a very good background, a very good foundation for me to write extensively about the IMRAD approach. So I'm not saying that that is a bad format, but I was able to learn so much from that particular experience to create something into, the innovation that we have into research writing. So again, if it is something like a journal will actually require you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you don't have option. You have to follow. But if this is something like an IMRED approach, the discussion part should actually integrate the data in such a way that you are to prove a point based on the results of the data. So I think that should be a guiding factor for all of us when we are writing, research paper, especially when we are integrating the results of the data through the with the hypothesis and some inferences for that purpose. Thank you.
Yeah. Superb answer. Really loved the way you just mentioned that it's not on the analytical part, but it is also related to the creativity as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really researchers, they are creative that how they are going to link it and how they are going to make it more attractive and inspiring even for the future research as well. And that's why we call it in art that it is not only just scientific methods we follow,
Yes.
we make a creative one as well. And I love the way you just mentioned that whatever you have been studying for the past, it helped you a lot or it is helping you currently as well, because we call it, it is just like brick by brick you go and it's step by step you learn, and all of them are stored in your database, and one way or the other it reinforces the current research. So very nicely you have just mentioned wonderful points to that. I can see that our time has already reached, but one last question which is very interesting, and I'm sure nowadays we are very much related to it, and that is ethical consideration because of AI and because of the wonderful technological advancement. So they want to ask the ethical perspective and ethical consideration. Last question, and that question is, what are the ethical consideration for, sorry, let me just bring that question, which is ethical consideration, because they were very fond of this one. Let me just bring it to you, because other question you have already addressed. So let me just bring the, yeah, what are
Oh,
the ethical considerations when writing discussion part? I'm sure this is very interesting one, because as you have mentioned in your one of your slide that in misconception of the conclusion that and discussion, that please restrict yourself to your findings and evidences only, but again ethical perspective will be very nice to hear from you. Yes, please. Thank you.
okay. Um, I think you were able to give me two questions. This one and of course the one with artificial intelligence. Let me address first this one because the artificial intelligence, it was actually very fresh to me because I just came from another talk from another university. But let me
Wonderful.
have this one. What are the ethical considerations when writing discussion part? You know what? The best thing here is, of course, no, it might sound so cliche already, but honesty will always be the best policy. It might sound so cliche already, but you don't need to add into data. You don't need to add into discussion wherein your personal biases will always be there. So that's I think a no, no. That's something non-negotiable for me. You don't need to give your personal biases. Let's say for example, your experiences, your background, etc., your company point of view, your school point of view, you're not supposed to put it there. That's something of an ethical consideration. Second, of course, you're talking about how the discussion point will roam around your interest, or perhaps your research objectives. No, discussions will actually be linking towards I think there was a question about cross-disciplinary. It's also good that you also have a basis. It's because you're looking also at how the other researchers are actually, thinking about the discussion point, and you can actually link about them. So it can serve as your point of view versus the point of view of the others, and you have to lead to a discussion point. So it could be that excuse me, that another point of interest will come from another country or from another author, and you bring it in the table in your discussion part in order for you to elaborate more on why, again, adhering, contradicting, or complementing the story in your discussion point. So if you are considering these areas of interest, so to my end, you just don't need to be biased at all. Otherwise, it will not serve the purpose of having a very critical, analytical way on how you're supposed to separate yourself from having your discussion. um but you have to agree, Dr. Shah, it's kind of difficult. It's kind of difficult in most cases. I've been through a lot of researches also, and I've been thinking about how my conclusion, how my discussion is being put into without personal biases at all. I myself know I'm still learning on how this can actually, impact or affect the way we actually put discussion point. But again, the point of interest is that you always have to concentrate on the results of the study. And I think you can never go wrong, no? Even if it is contradicting to your personal belief, you don't put a, I think it's at something, you know. But the bottom line is that you really have to preserve the authenticity of the result of the study, even if it's contrary to your personal belief. No, let me give you one, Dr. Shah. In the Philippines, no, when you are applying for a flight attendant, you normally say that the best preparation or the best chosen program for you to become a flight attendant is tourism. That's a running theory here in the Philippines. But you know what? When we conducted the study and we asked the human resource managers in different airline companies, you'll be surprised. It's nursing. It's not tourism. And we got the information from the HR managers of the airline companies. So the misconception is that what you normally feel or what do you normally believe may not always adhere to the result of the study. And I don't have the guts to change the result of the study because it came from the real core people, the human resource managers, because they are the ones hiring. But again, it's contrary to my belief. Because since time immemorial, it's in my head, it's tourism. So that's
Mhm.
one thing that I want you guys to consider also. No? Um, get away with your personal biases. So
Yeah.
I think that's my answer to probably number 8 and number 5 questions. But looking forward to artificial intelligence, you know what, Dr. Shah, to be honest with you, when artificial intelligence came into the picture, I'm negatively having doubts about it. That's my initial reaction. But you know what? After subscribing to some seminars, etc., and some authors as well, I bend my opinion about it. You know why? I think all these innovations are being put into this kind of conditions and situations to help us, similar to computers, similar to StreamYard. That's why we're using this innovation and technology. And to my surprise, no, based on my readings, I've been using AI even before. Like, for example, you're talking about google.com, you're talking about algorithms with social media, etc., etc. So I was like telling myself, so why do I have to be so cautious about AI? Well, in fact, I'm using it. And without us knowing, we're already using it. It's just that the buzzword of artificial intelligence becomes so unethical in the mindset of others because of some practices. But imagine the algorithms that we're using in terms of uh, knowing your behavior, the algorithms that knowing upon, let's say, for recruitment purposes, with no biases at all, no emotions at all, no relatives, no kinship at all, it will actually provide you with a very solid data. Now, surprisingly, Dr. Shah, I was able to find out also that even the American Psychological Association accepts already how chat GPT will actually be put in a will be cited in a research paper. And I was able to see also, like for example, Taylor and Francis, Elsevier, and even MDPI, they have already set their policies and guidelines. I think with Elsevier, you can use, but you cannot make ChatGPT as an author. So that's one of the restrictions. With Taylor and Francis, only for proofreading. Like for example, you're looking at grammarly.com, you're looking at Turnitin, which are practically AI, generated technology. So bottom line, Dr. Shah, I always believe that these technologies were made to help us and to to complement what we're doing. So instead of putting so much doubts to AI, let's embrace this kind of phenomenon. But I always believe that there should be restrictions, there should be regulations, in especially with research papers. And I think the most popular online databases are doing that already. So it's actually a high time for us that I believe we should embrace this kind of innovations. Anyway, Dr. Shah, IMRAD is an innovation. Grammarly.com is an innovation. Proofreading is an innovation. So who am I not to embrace innovations, especially with AI, when it comes to research? So again, before it was very negative to me, but now it's very welcoming, and I can't wait for the moment that AI will actually complement what we're doing in research. You know what? There was a question during the seminar, and how are you supposed to compare human intelligence to machine intelligence? And I was like telling them, I think the question should not be on the competition level, but it should complement each other. You don't always look into which one is better and which one is not the best. But I always believe that machine intelligence was made because of human intelligence. So I think it's not a question of who is better or who's gonna win or who's actually the best in a competition, but it should always complement each other. And that's practically the mindset that we are to move forward in order for us to embrace fully artificial intelligence. Without you knowing, you're using it already. Thank you.
Thank you very much for nice answer and Prof. Very nicely you have mentioned. I believe that technology itself is a neutral and unbiased, and it entirely depends on the user, that how
Yes,
the user is using it. And very nicely you have quoted the technology, the computer, that we are taking even advantage of this StreamYard software. Again, it depends on us that what kind of user intention is and how they are going to use it. And I really appreciate the way you just mentioned that we should be using it for complement purpose, to reinforce our work, to maybe to proofread and to improve our work in a ethical way. But I do agree with you that we must have some regulations for artificial intelligence as well. But again, we should be more focusing on the positive side of the artificial intelligence rather than the dark side of it. Very nice, and I love your another example that why we are always comparing which one is better. Rather, why don't we just see how they reinforce with each other? So that reminds me one of the thing which I have gone through one of the book, and I would like to share with you and for our audience from around the globe, that what you said is the same thing, that we say human are the artificial intelligence. It is just like human or the artificial intelligence. What if we say human and artificial intelligence?
that's better.
Yeah. So if we replace the or with the and, it will help us a lot. We don't say either this or this. We should say this and this. That will boost our research activities and efforts as well. So I believe we should look from other perspective, that human and artificial intelligence will contribute more better, rather than human or artificial intelligence, which will perform better. So it is just like, yeah, going hand in hand, and through this way, this innovation, we can take a lot of advantage. And through technology, we are serving a lot. And you held this wonderful webinar just because of this great innovation, and you are talking to the rest of the globe, and you are sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the rest of the globe just because of the technological advancement. So very nicely you have quoted, and thank you very much for sharing such a wonderful stuff with us and with our audience from around the globe. And since you have been to Kalwas on multiple times, and you know that at the end of the session we ask our each guest regarding their message to the world. So what would be your message this time to the world as a speaker, author, teacher, researcher, trainer, learner, and educator? Yes, please.
You never stop innovating yourself. Probably the best of tomorrow might not be the best of today, but you always learn from the past and make it like a very good foundation and how you can move forward. It will always be a futuristic approach on how you're supposed to put yourself in that pedestal, that you are more into advocating, you are more into learning, you are more into sharing, but don't rest on a particular status that you are just a simple, a you know a typical researcher, but you always look forward on how you can share. If you were able to meet your best, I think the next step is, or in order for you to be your best, will be your best, you have to share, you have to collaborate, you have to move forward. And I think you will create another pedestal wherein your best will actually be another best for everybody. So I think that would be my message to the world. Don't claim expertise for anything else, but definitely try to learn as much and innovate yourself to what is really demanded by the current world and the society. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. What a fine message you have given to the world. It is all about how can you refine yourself and how can you contribute better to the society and to this planet. And if everyone be their best, so definitely they will be producing great impact on this world. And we are looking forward for this kind of positive impact on the world. So very nice message you have given to the world. So, to the audience, that please do follow our distinguished guest speaker through his research work, and you can email him for future learning and guidance. He is very generous and always ready to help the people. That's all we have time for today. And thank you once again, Prof. Jojo. I really enjoyed this session, and I enjoyed the previous sessions. And whenever I meet you, I learn a lot from you. That's why in the beginning of the session, I just said that you are my mentor and my elder brother. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us and to the people around the globe. And I would like to thank our audience who joined us. If you have any additional questions about the information shared today, please email us or connect to the speaker directly through his email or social media. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. Until next session, take care of yourself. Bye bye.